problem is to the discipline. And if you, in marketing your article, you're marketing your theory, you do not carefully show why it is the case that this theory that you are proposing solves a genuine problem for the journal you're attempting to submit it to within the academic discipline that you are working within. See, the discipline defines what a problem is. So to a certain extent, this does precede problem recognition. But the triggering cue can come from anywhere. This doesn't provide the triggering cue, except that as you read it and you see deficiencies. You read the literature, you read the articles, and you say, it is deficient, it doesn't do this and this. As a consequence, this is the problem that I'm going to work on. Okay? This is the problem I'm going to work on. But there will come a time when you must defend that this is a genuine problem for the discipline. Think of neoclassical economics. You know, it explains about 5 to 10% of economic growth. This is a real problem, but they don't see this as a problem. Okay? After all, general equilibrium is their structure, and everything has to be within that structure, you see. So their discipline doesn't show it as being a problem. Question 5. So I think that's a better answer than the one than I gave before. Okay? Where is theory status? Theory status. How are we doing on time? Manja? Okay. Where's theory status? Remember, in the original model, there was something called theory status, and I said you can think of theory status as being 3 major types. Some theories are generally accepted as being the best theories we have to explain some kind of phenomenon. Some theories, some group of researchers say that they're working on, and some theories are rejected. Where's that? Well, that's over here. That's right here, the current disciplinary knowledge. So the construct that was in the inductive realist model of theory status, which focused on, that's over here in current disciplinary knowledge. It doesn't appear as a separate construct. Where's the process of crafting a manuscript? Okay. Starting about 1975 or so, I started doing a little presentation in various places called How to Publish Instead of Perish. And a significant part of that presentation had to do with crafting manuscripts. And I used the word crafting very deliberately, because when you craft a manuscript, it's almost like a work of art. It is crafted, you see. And now the word crafting is just standard. That's what everyone talks about. Where is that? Well, that is right here, new theory proposals. When you've engaged in creative cognitive acts that you believe have solved the problem that you started out to solve because you recognized some deficiency over here, it's time to craft the manuscript and send it to a journal, or perhaps do it in book form. But in our discipline and the social science disciplines in general, the journal articles are the chief mechanism for new theory proposals. You craft the manuscript here. In the process of the crafting, the manuscript and the theory changes. In the process of crafting it and interacting with reviewers. So reviewers say, well, where's this? And where's that? And why don't you explain this? And why don't you explain that? In the process then of crafting, sometimes, and this may be very difficult for you to believe, but sometimes reviewers are actually helpful. Okay, now, I'm not making a big, broad assertion that always reviewers are helpful. I have the same views about reviewers as most of you, okay? Yes. And it's always helpful for doctoral students when I make presentations. I always tell them, I do not have a single major journal article that at least one of the 3, 4, 5 reviewers, okay, I'll repeat it again, I do not have a single major journal article that at least one reviewer thought had no socially redeeming value, all right? Now, Manjit mentioned I'd won the Maynard Award 3 times, all right? The second one was on an article called General Theories in the Fundamental Explanando of Marketing, all right? Had 4 reviewers. One of the reviewers said, this is the kind of article that gives marketing a bad name, okay? Now, fortunately, at least, and one reviewer really liked it. And 2 reviewers thought, well, if you do this and 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 this, maybe it won't damage the discipline too badly. Okay? So what you normally get is this continuum. Every single major journal article I've ever written, at least one thought it had no socially redeeming value. In the Nature and Scope of Marketing, which was the first Maynard Award, that was in '76. Strange I would remember a date like that. One of the reviewers said, and referring to the 3 dichotomies model, there's absolutely nothing new here. There's absolutely nothing worth publishing here. Okay? All of this has been said many times before and said much better. And then the reviewer said, but you know, I think the model in the manuscript would be a neat way to introduce the subject of marketing to all my students. And I think I'll use it in my classes to introduce the subject of marketing to all my students. Had no socially redeeming value. He's going to use my model, okay, to introduce the subject of marketing. No socially redeeming value. Makes no sense, right? Makes no sense. That's the way reviewers are. Now, that's the standard review. Now, in contrast to that, sometimes reviewers do actually help. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they help and don't intend to help. In developing resource advantage theory, it was because certain reviewers would show things that we weren't really addressing that stimulated us. They provided triggering cues for us to develop the theory further. So they didn't mean to help us, but by being extraordinarily critical, they did help us. So crafting the manuscript is right there. 7 questions, 7 answers. Your questions. How much time would you like to, just a few?
We can do about 10 minutes.
Okay. Lou?
I don't know if 7 was the magic number, but let me ask you an 8.
Sure.
So, the inductive realist model, despite your youth, you're at a stage, is this a self-reflective model of a marketing theoretician? So, this come as a reflection of what you've been in terms of developing theory?
Well, inductive realism is my label. It's my label to describe a particular way of looking at philosophy of science. It's within the scientific realist general umbrella. Inductive realism is my label within that. The inductive realist model of theory status I first published in the philosophy of science literature. It seemed to me that the model, once I had developed it, made a contribution to philosophy of science, and I wanted to see if I could publish it in the philosophy of science literature, and it got published in the International Journal for the Philosophy of Science. And one of the things that the reviewers really liked, by the way, was that they said, we like your label of inductive realism. And after that, I then started using it, and much of my work is based on inductive realism, which the key premise is the long-term success of a theory gives reason to believe that something like it is likely that something like the entities postulated by the theory actually exist, and the structures and relationships postulated by the theory actually exist. And that's the inductive realist approach. And I get it from a guy by the name of Ernan McMohan, who was a philosopher of science who's died within the last about 5 years. He was at Notre Dame, a very prominent philosopher of science. So inductive realism is my label for my general approach now, and that's because, which by the way is contrary to if you're in love with Sir Karl Popper, inductive realism, he would say no. For him, all science involves only bold conjectures and refutations. That the inductive realism would be something anathema to Sir Karl. So it certainly isn't the mainstream necessarily approach. So yeah, inductive realism is my approach. That's my understanding of the question you asked. If I answered a different question, let me know later and we'll chat about it. Okay. See, one of the keys about teaching. If you get a question that you don't know the answer to, you rephrase it, of course, into a question you just might know the answer to. And sometimes I do that and I don't even know I do that. But that's how I interpret your question. Other question? Yes, sir.
You talk about the model being kind of weakly normative.
Weakly normative.
Can you talk about how you would make it more strongly normative?
That'd be a very good project for someone to work on. And I would encourage you to do that. Okay, that's the second way to handle questions that you don't. Okay, first way is to restructure. See, I didn't restructure his question. I simply said, first, that's a good question. You always tell them a good question, right? But then, secondly, to make it more strongly normative, I think it would be worth working on. I believe. And if I am one of the reviewers reviewing your manuscript, I guarantee you I won't say it has no socially redeeming value. Okay? But I think it could be done. I don't have further thoughts on it in that direction. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Would you mind giving us an idea of how do you, first of all, decide how much time you allot to new theory development versus empirical research in your own research, number one, and also what suggestions and tips might you have for organizing your research? And I have not found a good system for really keeping my research organized. I fortunately go in spurts where I'll have 2 months during the summer to focus, and then I'm swamped during the rest of the year. How do you keep your ideas and your research organized and flowing?
That's a good question. This is the counsel I give to everyone. First, I start with the premise that